Since the dawn of time, the world has been filled with threats and those who try to understand them. And this applies to the digital world as well. And there was certainly a time, not too long ago in fact, where most people didn't understand these threats at all. So throughout the 1990s, on the new World Wide Web, you end up having these mass panics of computer viruses with alleged capabilities that go beyond the screen, almost supernatural. And of course, many people rode on these fears either in jest or to obtain some kind of control on those who are gullible. Just like how the satirical tabloid Weekly World News once published a story about a computer virus that can spread to humans. Because that's ridiculous. We all know how a computer virus works. It's a malicious piece of code that is able to replicate itself and infect other computers on the same network, whether it's the internet or some kind of local network, where it can then do whatever it is programmed to do. And that's the key. You need some kind of connection to another computer. It's not a real virus in the literal sense. It can't spread through the air, right? Well, in October of 2010, something very unnerving allegedly happened to a man named Dragos Ruja, the main developer behind the annual Pwn2Own hacking competition. He had just installed a new copy of macOS 10 on his MacBook Air, and it was then that he started to notice the computer suddenly had a mind of its own. For starters, his CD drive was no longer working. He couldn't boot from any CD placed into his system. He thought, okay, maybe this was just a hardware issue. But he then noticed that all of his system configurations kept undoing themselves. His system data then started getting deleted. He was starting to think that this wasn't a hardware issue, but instead some kind of malware. So he went ahead and completely wiped the hard drive and reinstalled the operating system. But sure enough, the problem still persisted. As it turned out, this issue wasn't coming from the hard drive, but the BIOS, the motherboard of the computer, meaning that even a full system restore couldn't fix it. But it doesn't stop there. He noticed that this malware was now spreading across other computers on his network, even ones with different operating systems. He quickly disconnected them from his network, but it just kept going. And so, as a last resort, he disabled his Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and even unplugged the power from his wall, relying only on the battery. This is a technique called air gapping, as these computers were now completely independent from one another, in their own separate worlds. Yet the virus was still spreading, even to computers who were never connected to the internet in the first place. The malware became known as BadBIOS, which was capable of infecting Mac, Windows, Linux, and BSD systems. And word quickly started getting around the internet that it may just be the very first instance of a computer virus spreading through the air, quite literally. Through its strange, completely unknown engineering, it was somehow able to bypass these air gaps. Surprisingly, it gets even weirder. Actual word of the virus seems to have spread faster than the virus itself, and that's because we don't even know if it exists. BadBIOS has become an incredibly controversial, divisive subject within niche parts of the tech community, with some people swearing by it, others scoffing at how ridiculous it is, and then those who believe it to be nothing more than an elaborate hoax. And today, we are going to talk about this strange origin story. This is BadBIOS, the world's most mysterious computer virus. Now, browsing the internet can be quite scary, but you know what's even scarier? Googling yourself and finding out that your personal information has been publicly compromised. Well, good thing Aura, which is today's sponsor, is here to help you with that. Now, what is Aura, you ask? Well, thank you for asking. No one asks about Aura. Having personal data exposed isn't even just a privacy issue. It also affects your daily life through unending robocalls or spam emails. But Aura is a service that finds these data brokers that are using and selling your information and sends out takedown requests so that they can, well, leave you alone. These brokers are legally obligated to remove your info upon request. so why not have Aura do all that for you? But it doesn't just do that. Aura also serves as an antivirus, VPN, and password management tool all in one program. It also offers things like identity theft insurance, as well as parental controls features for any parents that want to protect their children from unsafe content. And it includes all these features for just one price. I began using it and was able to scan my computer for any malware, as well as use its VPN feature, allowing me to use the internet anonymously. It really is a great all-in-one security bundle, and if you go to aura.com/nationsquid, you can get 2 weeks completely free and see if any of your information has in fact been compromised. So protect your data and your online presence today through Aura. Now, tracing the origins to BadBIOS is seemingly impossible, as there is quite literally no documentation prior to Dragos' claims from 2013, the year he first posted about it. And he himself is unsure of where this strange malware came from. Consequently, this makes the entire story a he said, she said situation, which is the main thing that has raised many eyebrows about its authenticity. There's no way for it to be tested. And all that doubt is for good reason. I mean, a computer virus that can infect any operating system and still shows up even after wiping the computer clean and can still transmit without an internet connection? That's every computer user's worst nightmare. It sounds a little too over the top to be true, but surprisingly, this is not the first time that something like this has happened. To be clear, really the only way a virus could stay, even after the hard drive was completely wiped, would be if it was installed anywhere else other than the hard drive. In this case, Dragos claims the virus was installed within the BIOS, hence the name, meaning that it was installed on the motherboard, not the hard drive. This is the main reason why it can infect virtually any computer regardless of its operating system or if the system is restored, as those things aren't really relevant to begin with. Now, BIOS malware is incredibly rare, to the point where it is almost unheard of, and this is because of the fact that nearly every computer's BIOS is different. That virus would have to be programmed and tailored for that specific BIOS, which is already programmed and tailored for that specific computer. Not to mention, this type of malware would also need backdoor access to the BIOS in order to flash it, which if you're using a company like AMD, that is definitely something that's going to be encrypted and not public information. BIOS malware was more common back in the 80s and 90s when there was a lot less options to choose from computer-wise and when encryption technology wasn't nearly as secure. Most computers nowadays don't even use a BIOS, but instead a UEFI, which offers more features and enhances hardware performance, but the general concepts do still apply. UEFIs will not update properly unless they get a digital signature that's actually from the manufacturer, which means that if malware were to sneak in there, this would be caught right away. If these private signature keys were to somehow get leaked to the public, then yes, you could have a problem. The malware developer could very well forge the signature, so to speak, and create a fake update with this bad code. But these leaks are quite rare, and even if they did occur, these companies have protocols in place to quickly fix things. Now, I did want to acknowledge the distinction between BIOS and UEFI systems, but the terms are often used interchangeably in everyday language. For the sake of simplicity, I will be referring to it as a BIOS throughout this video. But in short, even if there was some extremely sophisticated BIOS malware that did exist and somehow bypassed these backdoors, it just wouldn't be able to spread that far because of these limitations. There's only one Microsoft Windows. There's only one Mac OS. There's like a million different types of BIOS. If a malware developer wants to target a specific computer, it is just much easier to just think of a smarter way to do it through the operating system. It's simply just not worth it. Now, in order for this to be considered a virus in the technical sense, it needs to spread itself and communicate to another computer. So how do you do that through the BIOS? Moreover, how is it able to communicate to other computers in the room that had no internet connection, no Bluetooth, no physical connection, not even connected to a charger in the wall? Yet they still caught it. The first airborne computer virus. This was the version of the story that made all the headlines, and a mystery that took years for Dragos himself to figure out. So how did it work? Well, the virus spread through sound. Dragos alleges that the virus transmitted its code through the computer's speakers, and the computers in the other room were able to pick it up through their microphones. But these sounds are played at high frequencies that our ears cannot hear. This idea probably sounds so ridiculous and over the top, like something out of some crappy detective show, but it technically is possible. Now, the actual programming and engineering of such a virus that sends and receives data this way would be very complicated, and frankly, I don't even fully understand it myself. I'm not a programmer. I run a tech channel and I don't know how to code. I'm like that guy that wears Nirvana t-shirts and is like, oh, I love Nirvana. They make the best clothes. Anyway, the point is I'm omitting a lot of important technical details here. But the basic concept of how transmitting data works is actually remarkably simple. And because I'm the creative type, I'm going to use an example of this that makes the most sense to me. Using sound, we're going to be transmitting pictures. So I am going to give a very simplified demonstration of what's going on here. So the idea behind this virus is that it can transmit malicious code through the speakers and microphones using audio frequencies that us humans can't hear. Our ears cannot detect them. We have no idea that anything is happening at all. So I have this audio file here. I wasn't able to get a perfectly inaudible high frequency sound that, you couldn't hear because, Audacity has aliasing software and all of that, which gives it some limitation, but I tried to replicate it in the best way that I could. And I want to show that on both of these computers, the internet is completely turned off. There's no connection to the internet at all. So here we go. Now, if I was in the other room or really focused on something, I would have thought this was just some kind of irritating buzzing, maybe some feedback from my speakers. But to my computer, it's Marilyn Monroe. We were just able to transmit an image without any internet connection, just through sound. Wow. Communicating information with sound is not at all unheard of. We've been doing it for hundreds of years, in fact. The telegraph systems in days of old used dits and daws against pieces of metal to communicate letters and numbers. A very primitive example of taking real-world information, modulating it into something objective and more tangible, and turning it back into that real information on the other side for the receiving human to understand. And this approach has kind of just stuck ever since. It's actually quite similar to how dial-up worked back in the 1990s. Those irritating sounds you heard logging on are literally the modem and your computer talking to each other through sound. These special sounds communicated protocols that the modem and computer were programmed to understand, allowing them to essentially negotiate what your internet speed was going to be, letting you online. This didn't necessarily have to be played out loud, but doing so did provide helpful diagnostic information in case the user needed to fix anything on their end. But in short, communicating data with sound is not weird at all. In fact, you're even doing it right now. Well, sort of. If you've seen my video about the history of the internet, I provide a very basic explanation of how this works. Computers are basically super advanced telegraph machines, but instead of using Morse code, they use something called binary. As we know, binary is a language made up of ones and zeros. A high electrical voltage means 1, low or none means 0. And it does all of this almost instantaneously. If you're on Wi-Fi, the same concept applies, but instead with radio waves. 1 and 0 would be on slightly separate frequencies that are distinct enough for the computers to understand. But instead of sound waves, they are electromagnetic waves. And instead of speakers, they are modems, Wi-Fi cards, etc. But the general concept still applies, and these are frequencies our bodies cannot see or hear, making it look like magic. So the virus is basically doing exactly this, but instead of pictures, it's binary. A binary version of the malicious code, and the sound is playing at frequencies that we can't hear, but the computers can, which the listening computer takes in and translates. But sometimes it is audible. Dragos himself complained of hearing a high-pitched noise in his lab, and it took him 3 years to find out that this was what was happening. So yes, this is all very much possible. But there are problems with this approach. Sound waves in general just aren't nearly as good with this kind of communicating. Using the Audacity example, when I transmitted this image this way, there is a clear sign of degradation, loss of quality compared to the original. And this is because of something called a signal-to-noise ratio. You're probably well aware that microphones can often pick up sounds that we either tend to ignore or can't even hear at all. You ever noticed how you could be in a room that is just so quiet and you can hear your voice clearly, but as soon as you record yourself talking, you hear all this loud static in the background? Yeah, it just sounds terrible. This is, of course, background noise. And the more there is, the more it is going to interfere with that data. And sound in particular is very sensitive to background noise. This is why a lot of old school modems have these insulated cups around their microphones and speakers. It was specifically to eliminate this background noise. I tried this experiment again, but put my laptop in the other room. And sure enough, the image quality was even worse. The distance and more added background noise of just the ambiance, my ceiling fan, all that stuff were external factors that interfered with the transmission of the image. Just like how the farther you are away from a Wi-Fi router, the weaker the connection. It's the same thing. But again, things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, stuff like that, communicate using electromagnetic waves. A speaker is essentially just a translator. It's taking these electrical signals from the computer and turning them into sound that we humans can hear. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are straightforward for data transmission, as it just needs to modulate this data and then demodulate it when it reaches the recipient. A speaker, in this case, would have to modulate, then demodulate, and then modulate again, and then demodulate again. Yeah, it's kind of like making a photocopy of something, and then making a photocopy of that photocopy, and you just kept doing that. The quality is just gonna get worse and worse. And if the data being sent is distorted enough, the computer's just not gonna know what to do with it. Computers are much more objective problem solvers, much more sensitive to accurate information than we are. If I cover part of this picture of me with my thumb, I still know that it's a picture of me. But if I cover part of this QR code, it's no longer recognizable. In other words, even the smallest bit of interference with this form of transmission could lead to failure. Some kind of data loss through this type of communication is pretty much inevitable. If you really wanted to minimize the level of background noise and interference, you would basically need to have these two computers in some kind of anechoic chamber, not a busy coffee shop. And out of these two places, let's be honest, where are you most likely going to find someone with a computer? But let's say you somehow found a way around this and figured out a way to transmit this information to all these computers without any interference. Even then, how would you know that the other computers are even listening? The reason this image was able to show up on my computer was because I had Audacity open. It's recording software that's specifically programmed to record and look for patterns from the sounds in my environment, hence why these images show up. If I just left my computer as is and played this sound, it would just sit there because it is not being told at that present moment to do something with that information. The same applies with transmitting this code. You can't just do that. The computer would need some kind of protocol that programs it to listen for it. It's one of the big reasons why that one scene in Bones is so ridiculous, where a computer literally blew up because one of the bones it scanned had malware sketched into it. Wait, why is it on LiveLeak? What? What?
Oh my god. Whoever did this wrote malware on Bone that took down $1 million worth of computers.
I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Yes, it is technically scanning something, but the code on its own doesn't mean anything. That computer actually has to be taught how to do something with it. It's like if I walked up to somebody that only speaks English and started speaking in French, telling them to make me a sandwich. Yes, they can see that I'm speaking to them, but they don't know what I am saying. Okay. She thinks I'm handsome. But if that person decided to take French classes, well, I like extra mustard. Computers are the same way. They have to learn or be programmed to actually execute this code. The 3D scanner in Bones likely wasn't programmed to execute something that resembles code that may or may not show up on a bone. But if the hackers somehow got a hold of the scanner's source code and found some kind of vulnerability that says to execute this script if it finds this pattern during a scan, then sure, that's plausible. I don't think the computer would blow up though. The same thing applies to BadBIOS, and because BIOS and UEFI systems are so secure and locked down, the odds of a malware developer getting access to the source code of not just one, but nearly every BIOS to ever exist is virtually zero. But Dragos himself said that as soon as he unplugged his speakers, the data transmission stopped. In other words, it couldn't have transmitted through sound at all, without the computer having already been programmed to listen and be on the lookout for this specific code from the malware beforehand, which implies that it spread through another way. Dragos claims that as soon as he completely wiped the BIOS clean, the malware would still show up again. And after further investigation, he concluded that as soon as he plugged in a USB, the infection immediately started again. So it seems most likely that Dragos somehow had dozens of his USB drives infected with this malware, and when he plugged these drives into the other computers, they got infected as well, which allowed for these computers to listen for these transmissions. But again, that still doesn't account for the fact that all these computers run a different BIOS, and that BIOS would be locked down. The whole story has left so many people online scratching their heads. A story based on so many proof of concepts that, at face value, sound straight out of science fiction, as well as things that are flat out contradictory. The whole thing sounds like something from a badly written TV show. But Dragos is not some nobody. He is a quite well-respected, reputable individual within his field. And other reputable sources who work with him have confirmed the virus's validity as well, which is why so many people are both mystified and starting to think that this may be part of an elaborate hoax or some kind of prank. For the longest time, Dragos never actually provided evidence outside of his written entries about it, which left people very skeptical. And when he finally did post something, people claimed it wasn't really anything that unusual. Some of them even hypothesized that the sounds he was hearing were just coming from his hardware and that he was trying to find things that weren't there. Not to mention that this type of malware would be incredibly expensive and time-consuming to create. If it did exist, it would be even more advanced than Stuxnet, which took multiple people years to put together and costed tens of millions of dollars. Just doesn't seem likely. To this day, BadBIOS has earned a very mixed reputation within the tech space. Many of those laughing at its absurdity, those on the fence who are simply trying to learn more, and those who swear that it's real and claim to have experienced it themselves. There are even entire communities around it. For now, BadBIOS remains a complete mystery, both in its capabilities and whether or not it even exists. Perhaps we've come full circle to all those virus hoax shenanigans the internet saw back in the 90s, but manifested in a much more convincing and well thought out way. Remarkable. But there is one thing that will for sure protect you from this malware if it does in fact exist. And it's through becoming a Patreon or channel member. Just click join or go to patreon.com/nationsquid. Trust me, it works. A special thanks to my patrons and channel members for making this video possible. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and click the notification bell so that you never miss a future video.